My name is Raul Ramos. I am a professor and researcher on AI, machine learning and deep learning here in Medellin at the Universidad de Antioquía. They are trying to address challenging industry problems. I mean, they want to be pioneers in that. As a good freak, a good space freak, I always wanted to do this kind of stuff.
You have experience both in academia and in business, and you don't really draw any strict line between the two, and you enjoy doing both. Would you say, from your perspective, is it challenging to take the AI research and implement it in the business world?
It is challenging because, like, if you focus just on solving a certain challenge, a certain problem, you may solve it. But then it may be difficult to take it into practice. Many reasons. Physically deploying a model, you may have constraints. You may not deploy it. You have computer memory resources. Maybe they are limited and so on. Yeah. On one side, and then on the other side, it is not only like the technical part, like of deploying a model, but actually measuring its utility. Sometimes from a scholar perspective, one says, right, let's theoretically, or let's not theoretically, but let's build a model to predict this thing, and maybe predicted this thing, whatever that is. The value of that prediction, it's still to be established in a business context. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when what one sets forth to predict, or whatever you do with your models, it is not clear how that could be benefiting a certain business process. So there is work on the business process to do. So it is challenging, but I do like to see people using the products that one does. And it is not trivial, because in many occasions, something that you think it may be very useful for people in your own perspective, mm-hmm. in reality usually is different. Mm-hmm. So it's good to try to have this anchor to the ground.
Since AI is a very trendy technology at the moment, there are many businesses that are considering implementing AI somehow. We already had a chance to chat a little bit about that not every business necessarily needs AI, not every problem necessarily needs AI in order to be solved. How does one, verify that? How does one go about it?
For good or for bad, AI, as you say, it's a very trendy term right now. Somehow there is a feeling that we have to jump into AI because otherwise we are going to be left behind. And that produces many things. First of all, because what is people's perception of AI is very different in very different places. Mm-hmm. So when somebody tells you, hey, I want some AI in my business, it doesn't always mean the same thing. I do like dissemination, like general public dissemination conferences very often. And there is one exercise that I start up with. It is that I put several objects in the screen. I show people several objects like a refrigerator, a car, a phone, like some medical device to get your attention and so on. And I ask the audience which one of those do they think they have AI, without previously defining AI. It's just trying to see what is the preconception that people have. And you get all kinds of disagreements. This has AI. No, this doesn't have AI. Why does it have AI? Because it has a light that does. No, but that's not AI. Yeah, that's AI. Starting from that, people have different perceptions. With this trendy that it's happening, even starting off from big data a few years ago, I think people have realized that the data that they have, it might have value. Probably this is data that they already had, and they just realized that may have value. And probably sometimes it's truly new data, because they have more systems, more sensors, information systems, whatever. Yeah, I think it is important for companies, organizations in general, first of all, to get a grasp on what is the actual process by which AI might bring value. AI, ML, whatever you want to call it. When I was starting in this, I was fighting with people. No, you don't call that AI. This is something else. I don't fight that anymore. I think you have to respect the names that people use for things. And starting from there, just getting a concrete idea, I think it's important that business people making decisions on how this process goes. These are processes that use data, and we have models that use mathematical and computational procedures. So we are facing an engineering process. And this process will be as useful or as good as we are executing it. If we don't make the correct data sets because we are not able to identify the correct data, that will not work well. If we don't train well the models, that will not work well. I think it's important that people understand the nature of the process. And then on the other side, and this is something that not all industries have the culture to be ready because different industries work in different ways, it is that this is a very experimental process. In the sense, it's basically impossible to come up with a customer and offer a turnkey solution without even seeing data and so on. Like, okay, we are going to be predicting what is the next product that customer is going to purchase with 87% probability. Right now, that cannot be done. So it's an experimental process. Let's make a pilot. Let's understand what is your data, what is the availability of your data, the accessibility to your data, how difficult it is what you want to do. I mean, the fact that we can predict things, make models to predict things, it doesn't mean that the prediction is useful for you. Maybe an 87% probability of getting right next product a customer is going to be buying. Maybe it's useful for the business, and maybe it's not enough for the business. Yeah. So all those things have to be discovered in an iterative manner. Yeah. So not every customer is ready for that, which is normal. And I think this has to be settled. I mean, it has to be understood, and the contracts that you establish with the customer, the expectations, the working teams that you establish with the customers, they have to understand that. And I think that's the main challenge right now.
Many people need AI plans, many people need data scientists, machine learning engineers, and it's definitely sought after. We are in this interesting situation post-COVID. Basically, we had to shift to kind of global online collaboration, and it seemed to open many doors for people that are based, I don't know, out of Colombia as yourself or your students, or out of Poland like myself. Do you have a sense of where we are heading with this?
First of all, I think this pandemic situation has accelerated something that I think was going to happen, but probably would have happened in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, I don't know. For instance, here in Medellin, there are lots of small software companies, many. And everyone that I talk to, they have changed to a hybrid model, and they are hiring people all over the country. And this is something that probably without the pandemic, they would have not been doing, at least for a few years. Yeah. I mean, this pandemic has been disastrous for everybody, I think. But one of the lessons that we can get from that, it is that it has accelerated something that would happen in a larger period of time. And in that sense, of course, the landscape has changed. From an organization perspective, you have access to a wider talent, but you have to endow yourself with the tools and working methodologies to actually be able to harness that talent. Yeah? It's not trivial to work with people remote. And for instance, in startups, in consolidated industries, maybe it's a little bit easier because their processes are consolidated. But in a startup, it's not so easy. Exchanging ideas, like when you are trying to build something conceptually, is harder remotely. No matter how many tablets everybody has, no matter how many blackboards like I have here, you have, it's difficult. So it's true that you have access to a wider talent. From the personal perspective, you also have access to a wider range of opportunities. The cost of labor is very different in different places, but the talent is not so unequal. What I'm seeing is that talent here in Colombia, US, China, Europe, India, I mean, you get very good people everywhere. You're going to be having competing professionals, probably with different labor costs. And it has many consequences. For instance, the fact that here in Colombia, in South America, you have friends in Argentina, in Brazil, in Chile. Many people are being hired by US because of the time difference. That is not so much. And that affects the local market because for local AI companies, their labor cost rises, but the customer pay not change. So that's also affecting the local markets. Yeah, it's all kinds of dynamics that are happening. In that sense, we are globally advancing. Globally advancing means that sometimes some people is good for some people as not so good for other people because things change. Have to learn how to live with that change, I think, for a while. Models have been existing for a long time. And what happened 5 years ago that we were not talking about MLOps? The profile that is really missing is the person who has a certain knowledge of the domain and also practical knowledge of AI.